Hi, everyone. I'm Diane Brady. I'm here with my colleague, Zach Everson, who is a staff writer and also author of the Checks and Imbalances newsletter. Zach, good to see you.
Likewise, Diane.
We're talking about Nikki Haley, and as viewers obviously know, the former governor of South Carolina, former U.S. ambassador to the UN, is first out of the gate in officially, am I right about that? I believe she's first out of the gate in officially challenging former President Trump on the
Yes.
GOP stakes. Talk a little bit just about how she's regarded among the GOP elite, because there's been a lot of swirl for many different reasons in the past week.
Right. I'm kind of at a loss for what her base is going to be as she makes this run. I'm kind of confused as to who she appeals to. And this is largely a mistake of her own doing, in that, as Trump famously pointed out, she disagrees with me, and then 15 minutes later, she changes her mind and agrees with me. So if you're a never Trumper, she doesn't fit your bill. And if you're somebody who wants like kinder and gentler Donald Trump, she's not going to fit it as well, because she typically comes out and agrees with him on that stuff. So I'm kind of at a loss for who her base is.
Well, let's start with her platform. Well, and then we'll talk with the reaction to her from some of the more right-leaning members of the party. But ageism seems to have been essentially her biggest calling card so far, and we're talking about these tests, for cognitive ability over the age of 75. I mean, that's just been so controversial. Tell me just how it's playing out in D.C. circles.
It's not a horrific idea. Can I say that?
Driver's tests make you do it.
I don't know about where you would draw the age limit, but there's clearly been a problem for as long as Congress has been around, probably, of lawmakers who have cognitive abilities are declined, staying in office. It came to the forefront recently with Dianne Feinstein, but you've also got to look at Thad Cochran, Strom Thurmond, Robert Byrd. I mean, there are all some senators who, we're certainly still in office past their prime, and we're still getting reelected. Also, Chuck Grassley is 89 years old, and there's a big difference. He just got reelected, so he would be 95 if he finishes out his term, and that is a concern. These voters did speak. There's nobody. Everybody knew what Dianne Feinstein's age was, and they can hopefully all add 6 to that, so they know it should be at the end of her term. But,
and the fact that she forgot that she'd resigned. I think there was visible evidence that of that cognitive decline.
And it had been known around D.C. for a while that she was off her A game. She used to be able to give really good answers to the press, and if it got to the point where if you wanted to get something from her, you were best off going to staff members. There are all these sort of things that are known around Capitol Hill that may not work their way out to voters. So, are they making a completely informed decision? Maybe not. But it is a conversation that we really should have.
Well, it's interesting because she seems to have tapped into something about the zeitgeist. And I guess if you're positioning yourself against the two existing candidates that are out there, being part of the next generation might not be a bad strategy.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, that's one of the biggest knocks against both of those two is that,
and those two being Biden and Trump. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Biden and Trump. It's just, what's a debate going to be like if it were to go between the two of them the next time? Like, it's just, how is it that we have in all of this country, and it's hundreds of millions of people, we end up with two people who they're not even baby boomers. They predate the baby boom, who are, the leading contenders to be our next president. So it's a valid point she raises, but you're going to need more than that to get yourself elected.
Well, what I found interesting is how it's been conflated. Ageism meets sexism, because that whole conversation around being in your prime has been turned against her. So let's look at Don Lemon and what's happened with CNN and this, well, she's not in her prime debate. I mean, this does seem to also get into, frankly, how women are viewed in politics, and it immediately became an attack about her.
Right. And that's what makes it so difficult to have the conversation that we need to have on this, is that it's either going to come up it's going to become partisan, whether who has the congressperson who's at the center of this issue at the moment, in which case right now it is, the Democrats. But it's something we need to talk about. But again, like, if you just arbitrarily draw an age line, that's tough. because that is, you do get into ageism with something like that. So is it something where they'd all have to take a test? I mean, there's no easy answer. And to do something like this, it seems like we need a constitutional amendment, because you're going to start limiting who can be a senator and who can't. And that seems like you're going to need to override some part of the Constitution.
I'm thinking of all kinds of tests we could give, and probably not all of them would turn out well. I want to ask you a question about being first out of the gate. Is that feels like a perilous place to be? Are there advantages? And why call it so early? Why not hold back a bit?
Well, you're out there first, so you can start fundraising earlier. You can start building up staff earlier. Your name gets out there earlier. There's a benefit. I'm gonna bet that Haley does not end up with the money that Trump or DeSantis, if he were to run, will have. So this is a way of getting herself out there and getting a lot of free media publicity, because we're all talking about her. If she was the fourth candidate to come out, I don't think she'd be getting all of this attention. So there's certainly the advantage that way. As for being the only candidate against Donald Trump, double-edged sword. You're out there, the thought is you could be the only punching bag, but it also might mean you're getting that out of the way earlier. And honestly, you don't have to be a announced candidate against Donald Trump to be his foe.
Well, and plus he has come out against her before, but I was very interested when she said recently that Ron DeSantis's "Don't Say Gay" law does not go far enough. It makes me wonder if she's starting to feel some pressure to lean more to the right to appeal to that base, or if that's really fundamental to how she's viewed the world, for years now.
Yeah, it's a great question. And that's the way we're set up with the Republican nomination process, still going through Iowa, New Hampshire, and some pretty conservative places, South Carolina, some pretty conservative places to start off. So, it's not surprising to see somebody pivot towards more of a conservative line and maybe swing back more when we get to the, if they were to make it to the general election.
And one other thing I want to ask about Ann Coulter, I suppose conservative pundit, I would call her. Some of the statements she's made about Nikki Haley: go back to your own country, called her a bimbo, a preposterous creature. Now, I don't know if that says something about Ann Coulter, but give me some sense as to, that's pretty fierce, vicious stuff to be putting against a GOP candidate. Is there a long-standing rivalry there, or is this just the rhetoric that's the norm at this point for Ms. Coulter?
No, I don't know if there's any history between Ann Coulter and Nikki Haley, but it's definitely the norm for coming out of Ann Coulter's mouth. It's a good way to get herself some attention. She's been doing this for decades.
So let's, you're not a betting man, Zach. You're always very reasoned these things. Give us some sense as to what to look for in the coming weeks. I know it could probably be a pretty extensive candidate or slate of candidates we're looking at for the GOP nomination. Nikki Haley's out there setting the conversation around ageism. What else are you looking for?
Well, one of the interesting things is Tim Scott. He's kind of considered the wise guy pick, the one who's not up there with the favorites, but if you want to seem like you really have an in, you're going to say, I think Tim Scott. And it would be very interesting if he were to run, because both he and Haley, of course, are from South Carolina. Mm-hmm. So it would make it hard for either one of them to win that state in a landslide. So it would be interesting to see if he takes any steps. And he's doing some of the right moves in terms of fundraising and staffing up that seem like he is headed in that direction. I'm curious to see who does become the second opponent to Trump out there. I don't see much of a rush out there. There's also the question of how the Republicans are going to play this, in that by and large, they don't want Donald Trump to be the nominee again. A lot of other people would like to run against him, and that plays into his hand where he can just pick them off one by one like he did last time. And if the Republicans are going to coalesce quickly around a candidate, I think that would be in their best interest if that's what they are trying to do, is dethrone Trump. There's no signs of that happening, though. It's tough, when you've wanted to be president your whole life, and this seems like you're the right age and the right experience, and this is your time. Are you going to put party first? Probably not. So, as for Haley, I think she's got a good angle of being a potential pick for a vice presidential candidate if somebody else other than Trump gets the nod. I think she's represents a very key state in South Carolina, and she can bring some interesting constituencies out there. And she certainly has both the domestic experience, having been the governor of South Carolina, and the international, having been the U.S. ambassador to the UN.
And ageism feels perhaps like a safer place to be than raising some of the legal challenges that the former president faces at this point, given the base. So There we go. More to
Absolutely.
come. Thanks, Zach.